Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Anthony, if I may start with you, simple question. Is it important to obey the law?
It is very important to obey the law. I thought I might
Great.
get a question.
So we'll carry on about that then, because the question is a reference to the government admitting a new bill to amend the UK's Brexit deal with the EU will break international law. Let's remind ourselves what the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said in the Chamber.
I would say to my honourable friend that yes, this does break international law in a very specific and limited way. We are taking the power to disapply the EU law concept of direct effect required by Article 4 in a certain very tightly defined circumstance.
Very specific and limited way. Why on earth did you sign up for this deal as a party and then campaign on it to win the election?
Well, obviously, it's an extraordinary treaty in extraordinary circumstances at the end of last year. I wasn't personally in Parliament at that time, but yes, we did obviously sign up to it.
Well, you wanted to be an MP enough and you signed up to this manifesto, didn't you?
No, absolutely. It's just when you say you, it's in the collective sense rather than me individually. But it was an extraordinary treaty done under great pressure. A lot of things have changed. The EU has...
under great pressure? Sorry, there's a video... I'm so sorry. You cannot rewrite history here. It was not under great pressure, was it? When Boris Johnson's being filmed with a cake or whatever it was, going into an oven, saying it's an oven-ready deal, and it's here we are, and let's do this, Britain.
In terms of the negotiation of this deal, it was clearly there was a lot of political pressure, which we all remember.
It was oven-ready. It was easy. It was right.
You're taking quotes out of context there. The withdrawal agreement that we negotiated last year is what we're talking about now.
I'm telling you the quotes about that from the Prime Minister.
That was negotiated at the time. What has happened is the EU is playing extreme hardball. It's a very, very limited change from the international treaty. This has been done as a sort of precautionary measure in case of no deal. It isn't unprecedented. Other countries have done this. For example, Canada, when it legalised cannabis in 2018, it broke its international treaty obligations on cannabis. The UK has done it before in terms of the ECHR ruling on prisoner voting. Extremely limited changes in extraordinary circumstances.
So this is a deal with our closest neighbours and allies. This is a treaty that we signed up to in good faith. And we've had Brexiteers getting in touch with us on the programme this week saying, I'm OK with no deal. What I'm not OK about is that we become a country that signs up to something in good faith and then we go and break the law.
Well, it is a change in the law. It is a
breaking
clarification.
The law. Sorry, I'm going to quote. I'm going to quote.
You've already quoted it. You don't need to quote it.
Well, I'll keep quoting it if you're going to re-quote it in a different way.
Well, I'm not. It's okay. It's breaking the law in a way that clarifies a certain implementation.
So can I break the law on Monday? Can I meet up with 8 of my mates?
No, just because in an extreme and extraordinary circumstances, the government has decided to, break this international law does not mean it's okay to break the law in all circumstances. And so people must use...
Say that again a little bit slower for our listeners. Why don't we slow this down? It's okay to break the law in a very specific and limited way when it suits the government's political ends. Right? We've heard this before, have we not, with the Dominic Cummings playbook about how lockdown worked for one member of the closest circle of the Prime Minister and for the rest of the country. And many Conservative supporters were up in arms. But let me just get this straight. I can't break the law in a specific and limited way on Monday if I need to, in extraordinary circumstances, convene 8... Let me finish this point. Convene 8 members of my family. If I have extraordinary circumstances on Monday night to meet 8 members of my family, can I ask you as a Conservative MP, can I break the law?
This came up with in the Dominic Cummings thing. I think the audience will get tired if you go through all that again. But actually,
I don't need to go through it. It was a quick reference, and they're flight of foot. Let me tell you that.
Yeah. In all law, and this is subject to interpretation by courts and everything else, there is often a sort of proportionality thing, a extreme circumstances thing. Is there physical harm thing being done? And there is always sort of a get out that the court would understand that actually had no alternative but to do something in a certain way. But that does not mean, and I'm sure the audience, that everyone's got common sense, does not mean it's okay to break the law in all circumstances and there's no need to obey any laws. It's clearly not right. And the government is...
I talked about extraordinary circumstances.
It is extremely rare for the UK to break any international commitments, and this is happening now, but it is extremely rare, and only does.
Are you proud of it?
I don't think anybody wants to be in this situation. I don't think
Are you proud of it?
Prime Minister, I see what the Prime Minister says at this time. No, we obviously don't want to be in this situation. I believe
Are you proud of it?
Law. obviously I'm not proud of it. That's I said I don't want to be. None of us want to be in this situation. But
Theresa May is not proud about it. Theresa May is incredibly concerned that this is going to lead to a lessening of our standing around the world, that our word is no longer our bond in this country, and fairness and our reputation is important.
Well, clearly, but we've got an extraordinary reputation as a law-abiding country, and yes, that's very important. And no, we don't want to damage it. But as I said, other countries have broken international treaties in very limited ways. I mentioned Canada in 2018 when it legalised cannabis, clear breach of its international treaty obligations on the drug laws. Do people see Canada as a rogue state? No, they don't. And people know that, in almost all circumstances, with extreme exceptions, we are an incredibly law-abiding country, and far more law-abiding than many other countries. I used to be Europe correspondent for the Times, and I'd covered all the breaches of European laws by different European countries. And we are by far one of the most law-abiding countries in terms of EU laws than most other EU countries that were far more flagrant in their breaches of them.
Well, we've got some messages. Ian in Cornwall, two wrongs do not make a right for the Conservative... Sorry, please, may I read our listeners' messages? Yeah. For the Conservative MP to suggest that this country or that country broke international law, therefore it's OK that we do, it's completely unacceptable, says Ian in Cornwall. What extreme circumstances is this guy talking about? Another one, I've decided not to pay my tax this year as it's an extraordinarily and limited event. People not making money at the moment, Soz says Christian. This is what I'm getting in on the text messages. What do you say to them?
Yeah. Obeying the law is incredibly important, and it's only in the most extreme circumstances that the government would consider doing it as it has done now.
And two wrongs don't make a right?
Well, of course, two wrongs don't make a right.
Well, you've just said other countries have done it, so we can do it.
I didn't.
You did.
Say other countries. No, you're putting words in my mouth there.
You gave us an example of Canada. You went around the world to tell us.
I didn't say two wrongs make a right. I was just making a point. When people are saying it's unprecedented, no other countries do this, only rogue nations do it, then I just point out that actually, other countries do it, and they're not considered rogue nations. So the idea that the UK does this and therefore everyone will see it as a prior state is clearly nonsense.
That's not actually what our listeners were saying. Our listeners were talking about the fact the words rogue state did not come out my mouth. I did not say that from any of our listeners. I asked you specifically.
I was paraphrasing, but
I asked you specifically based on international reputation and what Theresa May had said, but also what our listeners had said. Messages here coming in around this. I'll come back to those in just a moment. Stephen Kinnock on the line for Labour. Stephen Kinnock, Bernard Jenkins was on this programme yesterday as this news was starting to break around Theresa May's line of questioning in the House of Commons. And he said, this will make us the envy of the world. This will make people proud that Britain stands up for its sovereignty and stands up for what's right. Stephen Kinnock, what do you say to that?
I just think that's absolutely extraordinary. These are absolute concepts, not relative concepts. You have to either obey the laws that you have put down and lodged at an internationally legally binding treaty with the United Nations, or you don't. And by the way, there's also a massive issue here of the manifesto commitments of the Conservative Party. They won the December election. Fair play to them. They've got that big majority. But that was based on an oven-ready deal, which included all of the terms of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So they're not only damaging the brand of the UK in terms of our standing in the world and our respect for international law, it's also about our democracy here at home. And if people vote for something which is a fundamental manifesto commitment, you could argue perhaps the most important part of the debate going into the election, they are then looking to unravel that. And really what they should be doing is getting this deal done in the national interest. We need to move on. We need to get a trade deal done that respects what they've signed up to. Does this not go there?
Stephen, does this not go there in that way? So is this not in any way, from your point of view, because you have been, it's safe to say, it's been a long debate, this Brexit situation, and, as Anthony was saying, he wasn't even an MP for most of this. Take that point. But in terms of where you have been on this, you have been one of those MPs campaigning to get a deal, to get through this, to accept that result of the referendum. There were lots of shades of Labour in the run-up to the election last year, but that's where you were. Is there any way that you can understand as a pragmatist that this may be necessary in the event of no deal to do some of this tinkering, which has been admitted to be breaking the law by the government that we have right now? Can you accept any of that argument from today's changes that are going to happen?
No, it just doesn't stack up at all, because whether you like it or not, the withdrawal agreement was signed. It's an internationally binding, legally binding treaty. So that is the basis on which we have to do the divorce deal. And you do the divorce deal so that you can have then negotiations about the future relationship. And by the way, also going out and striking all these fabled trade deals with other countries like the United States or Japan or whatever it might be, they're not going to trust a single word that we have to say, because the UK is now saying, well, we sign up to certain terms in these trade deals, but by the way, if something happens that we don't really like, we're just going to reopen the books and change it all. So, it's completely counterproductive in terms of the government's so-called global Britain strategy. It's massively damaging to our international standing in the world. It completely undermines our moral authority when we're taking positions on an increasingly assertive China or the law breaking that we see from the likes of Vladimir Putin. So, on every count, both in terms of our diplomatic standing in the world, of whether or not we can be trusted to do future trade deals, and the democratic mandate that the government got in December is also fundamentally being undermined.
Let's pick up that point.
Troubling.
Let's pick up that point. Deirdre, I promise to bring you in just a moment, if you don't mind. Let me go to Anthony back on that point. The democratic mandate. What do you say on that particular point? You came in.
Well, the democratic mandate was to reach a deal with the EU, a trade deal, and that's what I very much hope happens over the next 5 weeks. The deadline is October the 15th. The government is obviously doing everything it can to do that, and part of this tinkering, as you just called it, is with an objective of reaching that, and indeed to make sure that if things do go wrong, that actually the consequences aren't that bad. I absolutely hope we reach a deal, but I really don't think it will affect our trade negotiations with other countries, because people can see what's going on. They can see the negotiations with the EU in terms of they're playing extreme hardball, etc. What is important in these trade deals is having a proper dispute resolution mechanism, and if we have a trade deal with the US or with Canada, Australia, whatever else, there will be dispute resolution mechanisms in there. So if either side tries to shift position, there's a way of resolving it, and it'll be done under WTO rules.
So Stephen, is the likes of Stephen Kinnock and Theresa May, are they just overreacting?
I don't say that overreacting.
You just said he's not going to do the exact thing that Stephen just said it will.
I'm not going to get into personal comments about Stephen. I'm just saying I don't think it will have that big an impact on negotiations with Australia. I mean, I've talked to the Australian government, and they're very keen to reach a deal. They feel very close to the UK. They're not going to look at this and say, well, actually, we're not going to do a deal with the UK as a result. It simply won't happen.
Stephen, a right to reply on that, and then to Deirdre. Stephen?
Well, what the government is proposing here is to change the dispute resolution mechanism. That's the whole point. They're saying that the UK should now be able to unilaterally decide what the status of goods going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland is. But that's fundamentally opposed to what has been agreed in the withdrawal agreement, which is that dispute resolution has to take place between the UK and the EU. So you can't have your cake and eat it. You have signed up to a legally binding international treaty. It has been lodged and registered with the United Nations. You cannot then go back and say, sorry, we actually didn't ever think that made sense, because it fundamentally undermines the credibility of our legal service. The government's top lawyer has resigned over this. He clearly doesn't feel this is tinkering. He clearly feels that he cannot work for a government that is fundamentally undermining.
I want to get Deirdre's voice into this, but just a couple of messages here. Legally binding. Apparently this means nothing anymore. The UK reputation now totally trashed. We should have guessed that from the Durham incident. I know, Anthony, you wished for the listeners of Five Live to be terribly bored of Dominic Cummings, but I cannot say that they are if I'm receiving messages still about them, that situation. Has any other country broken a legal agreement it signed less than a year ago? Nothing extraordinary has changed, says Neil in London. Mark in Suffolk, been an extremely unprecedented year, Anthony Brown, with the pandemic. I'll not be paying my taxes this year. Now, Anthony, these are quite extraordinary messages of what you're saying is necessary to do and perhaps describing as tinkering. Let you come back to that in just a moment. I'll give you a moment to think about a response to our listeners. Deirdre, where are you on this? I suppose the SNP maybe are enjoying the chaos.
No, we never enjoy chaos, Emma. But I'm actually still reflecting or reeling, really, from the news that Bernard Jenkins thinks that this will make the UK the envy of the world, and that Anthony thinks that the rest of the world apparently won't even notice. It is all over the papers internationally and all over social media.
I didn't say they wouldn't notice.
I'm
I
afraid
just said it wouldn't
that's what I
derail
heard
trade
from what you were
agreements.
saying.
I didn't say they wouldn't notice. I said they can see what's going on.
Anthony, you've had a fair crack in mind.
Let's hear what Deirdre has to keep saying.
I think the international credibility of the UK is utterly at stake here. I mean, Stephen mentioned Jonathan Jones resigning. That is an unprecedented resignation of such a senior figure, a legal figure in the government in this way. Now, this, I think, emphasises just how serious this situation is. We have a PM who has form on this. You'll remember, of course, he unlawfully prorogued Parliament last year in order to get his deal through. From the SNP government's point of view, of course, the only good deal for us, particularly in view of this chaos, is a deal with the EU as an independent country. This is the majority of people in Scotland want to stay in Europe. You know, we talk about democratic mandates. The democratic mandate that was expressed by the Scottish people has been routinely ignored.
Yeah, but the democratic mandate, sorry, Deirdre, let's not repaint history here. The democratic mandate of the Scottish people was to stay within the United Kingdom, and that means going with what the United Kingdom has voted for. You may dearly wish every day, as I'm sure you do as an SNP MP, that was different, but I also have got to observe that mandate.
And you will be aware, of course, that the polls have shifted quite considerably.
And we will be aware that polls are not always accurate, so let's keep going. Deirdre.
The people of Scotland looking on at this búrach, as we call it in Scotland, are appalled. They are.
Well, the people in England may
unhappy.
Also be appalled. They're not asked. The people in England may also be appalled. We're not getting the most favourable text.
As well they should be. And I'm very sorry for people in England. I wish they had more choices available to them. But I'm afraid we do have a choice, and that is independence and getting us away from this terrible government.
That is the choice that you think that you have the right to have. Whether you are granted that by the Prime Minister is a whole other ball game. But I suppose that's a question, isn't it? When I was speaking to one of your colleagues last week, the problem with the SNP position about what is going on with Brexit is you would like to have a referendum whether there is a deal or not. So that's why I asked, are you enjoying the chaos?
Well, of course we want a referendum. I mean, if there is a deal, I mean, I think some of this is game playing, isn't it? I mean, I suspect that...
Are you accusing politicians of playing games?
Yeah, no, unbelievable. I suspect that Mr Johnson is wanting to cause this amount of chaos now in order to distract our attention away from the fact that he will come back with some sort of deal, but it will be so much poorer than the deal we currently enjoy with Europe. He is attempting to obfuscate, and I think some of this is just, as I say, game playing.
But the point is, are you rooting for a deal? I just want to get a sense of that. Are you as a group of MPs who sit in Westminster each week when Prime Minister's questions, or, remotely as we are in this world, are you rooting for a deal right now?
Well, as we currently sit in the UK, of course we want some sort of deal to appear. Our suspicion is, though, that, our knowledge really is that we will not be getting anything like a decent deal for the people of Scotland, and that's what we're concerned about.
But, of course, as part of the United Kingdom, as you are.
Currently,
Stephen, just back to you on this. Do you think there will be a deal? Of course, this could be seen as extraordinary brinkmanship.
I think the activities of the government over the last 24 hours or so have reduced the chances of a deal because we've seen that the European Union doesn't respond well to sabre rattling, and this constant idea that by threatening no deal and doing all this sort of tough macho posturing, you're going to get a deal. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that works, but we need a deal. The government promised that there was an oven-ready deal. It would give unfettered access to the single market. It would take care of security issues, and it would respect other commitments made in the political declaration. And that's what we want to see. We actually would like very much for this debate to move on so that the country can face up to the massive issues that it's facing, particularly dealing with the pandemic and the post-pandemic recovery. So there just doesn't seem to be much common sense being applied here. And the government looks a bit like a sort of punch-drunk boxer, flailing around, failing to land any punches.
Or a government government landing some severe punches in a very tough negotiation, standing up for what it thinks it can do. Anthony, let me put this to you. Can I just ask you, because I really want to bring us onto those COVID restrictions, if I may. Anthony, where are your optimism levels about actually getting a deal at the end of all of this?
I think ultimately we will end up with a deal because it's in both sides' interest to have one. But I've been covering EU negotiations for 20 years or involved with them in different ways. There is always extreme brinksmanship. Each side ends up playing games, as it were. They play to their own galleries, etc. And I've learned just to not get that worried about the vicious noises that come out just before deals are made. The darkest moment is before the dawn, etc. So see that in context of all the previous negotiations. And I think that, yes, this is brinksmanship, etc. But I'm hopeful that there will be a deal.
The messages have kept coming in, Anthony, about following the rules and the laws. Yes, lots of active listeners. That's the joy of radio, and especially on 5 Live. Yeah, there's a bit about that still coming in. It has been an extraordinary year. Some people saying actually it's not been in terms of Brexit. But let's put that to one side for a moment. On Monday, I mentioned people in England will no longer be able to socialise in groups of more than 6, with fines for those who don't comply. Do you understand why, yes, you can say, yes, people are sensible. They know there isn't a crossover from this with regards to a treaty through to breaking the law around that. But do you understand why some people may get a different message, Anthony?
Of course, I understand why some people get a different message, and it's not clearly it's not ideal messaging for a national government. But it also, I think, most people are sort of wise enough and sensible enough that they know there's a difference between doing a very specific and limited change to clear up an ambiguity in an international treaty in the heat of a negotiation, from actually deliberately breaking a law that's there for very good, public health reasons.
The first thing you described is the breaking of a law, though. Let's also just be clear.
Yeah. No, I said that. The government said that, and
No, I know, but the two are breaking of laws.
We're not. I know, but it's very, very different circumstances. And what I'm saying is, just because breaking law in one circumstance and we've been through this, we're going around circles here. In extreme circumstances, in a very, very limited way, the clearing up ambiguities in the negotiation is completely different from deliberately breaking the law that's there for a public health reason where there aren't the same circumstances. And I think people, it's just common sense, and most people absolutely understand that. And the laws on coronavirus, clearly the government, has not wanted to introduce none of us have wanted all these restrictions with relation to coronavirus. None of us wanted this pandemic, but unfortunately we've had to have restrictions in this country and every other country, severe restrictions on our civil liberties in order to reduce the impact on public health and reduce the death rate. And the government's being flexible about that. The overwhelming majority of people have also, they can see, they've responded amazingly well, the public, to these restrictions. I've been really sort of, quite astonished at how, sensible people have been.
It can't be that great, though, can it? If we're going back into having to be socially distanced and only hanging out, we've always been socially distanced, but with 6 people.
And nobody wants, and absolutely, again, nobody wanted this, but the countries around the world, particularly France, Germany, Italy, Spain, are seeing a massive resurgence in the number of cases. They're going up a bit in the UK. Thankfully, the death rate is staying very low, but we've got to act to make sure that we don't get the sort of second wave that they're seeing in other countries.
And some would definitely be saying they feel reassured that something has come out. They're a bit confused why it's not starting. Well, they're a bit confused why it's not starting today, but it's starting on Monday in England. Let's bring in Deirdre. Deirdre, just to cross over to how things are in Scotland. It was revealed 3 people had died in Scotland after testing positive yesterday for the virus. The highest number of deaths since the 30th of June. Are you going to bring this in line with what's happening in England, do you think? Well, what's your take on that?
Obviously the First Minister looks very closely at what's happening across the world, including across the border. It remains at 8 people in social gatherings in Scotland. But, we have had a number of local lockdowns. Those happily prove that our test and protect system is working. But you just can't be complacent with this virus. It's a deadly virus and it seems very easily spread. So it's of course very upsetting for people having to observe some of these regulations, but really it's lives at stake here. We just have to protect them as far as we can. It's a tough decision for any government.
Stephen, your read on the new rules in England?
Yeah, we support any measures to protect public health, absolutely no doubt about that. But I think what needs to be really questioned here is the testing fiasco in England, particularly. I mean, we've just got nowhere in terms of the app. The contact tracing is very patchy. Support for people who need to self-isolate, it just isn't really there. Contrast that with Wales, where we're hitting 9 out of 10 in terms of testing, and 9 out of 10 of the people they've been in contact with. So, I think what we need to do is return confidence to society and to our economy. We support the need to reopen our economy. We've got to get the country back up and running again. But what will really underpin that is confidence in a test and isolate system that actually works for the country. And until such time as that is in place effectively, I think we're going to continuously have this kind of roller coaster ride where new measures are having to be brought in place. That does cause confusion, and it also removes confidence from the economy. So the government needs to sort this fiasco out on test, track and trace.
Maybe that's a slight preview as to what the lines of your leader, the leader of the Labour Party, will be going on today in that joust at PMQs. We'll be expecting at midday, and of course at 4:00 again. You'll hear it here all live on 5 Live. There'll be a press conference with the Prime Minister about these changes, but also the drilling down on the message with regards to some of those safety measures that we've been doing since March and have become more and more the norm. So everybody keep washing your hands, don't touch your face, social distance, and masks where you are asked to wear them. Anthony Brown for the Conservatives, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Deirdre Brock for the SNP, a fulsome thanks to you as well, and to Stephen Kinnock for Labour. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Emma.